Hi, everyone. Today, me and Tete are going to be reviewing The Batman 2022. Previously, Tete has already reacted to the movie in a previous podcast episode that I will provide a link to in the description. I have also done a real time reaction slash review to the movie, which you can also read in the description. And, that was the one where I watched the movie and I cropped out the movie itself so you can't see it. There's no copyright infringement. And I'm reacting to certain scenes that are important to the movie. And at the very end, I give a short 4-minute review. Well, in this one, both of us are going to concurrently review the movie together now that we have both watched it. And we're going to cover basically the same questions that I asked Tete in that first podcast I just talked about. But this time, I'm going to be answering the questions, and then we're going to have a discussion on the movie based on those questions.
Exactly. I'm so happy you saw it. I'm glad you got to see that goodness of cinematography and storytelling. So, away.
Right. So we're going to get into some really in-depth analysis with both of us having watched it and analyzing it.
Yes.
All right. So the first question is, what were your expectations for this movie? Did the movie meet them? As for myself, my expectations were quite high because you gave me this excellent review, as you can see in the podcast linked below. And I saw all the trailers, all the clips, and all the reviews, and I was very impressed. This looked like a really great movie. Probably better than The Dark Knight 2008, which was the one that I remember people talking about a lot in my childhood. Personally, I maybe was too young to understand it or really appreciate it. Like, I did think it was scary and very atmospheric, but it did not make much of an impression on me. But once again, I was young and I was distracted because I was watching it with a bunch of high school friends. So paying attention to the themes wasn't really high on my agenda. But definitely, the Batman 2022 made a strong impression on me, especially since I haven't really watched any superhero movies that I really enjoyed in recent years, especially after 2015.
Very true. And um, I'm so happy that the movie met your expectations. I'm happy to have been part of building that up. The movie actually outmet my expectations. I mean, a lot of people were ranting and raving about it, and I was a little reluctant, seeing how some of the current things, like the whole current debacle with DC. So this right now is DC redeeming itself. But I had seen the kind of whole debacle with the whole Justice League thing, the fact that the Wonder Woman sequel wasn't all that good. Nobody come for me, but I didn't think much on it.
Mhm.
But this movie really surpassed my expectations. It was the first time in a very long time that a movie gave me an experience, and it was an experience that had a long lasting effect. And that's something that one rarely experiences in cinematography or just cinema in general. So the movie definitely surpassed my expectations.
Mhm. To be honest, when I watch movies, I'm sort of afraid that I would be bored because that is an experience I've always had. Well, not always, but ever since I was a teenager and, moving on to young adulthood, I got easily bored while watching movies, especially superhero and a lot of action flicks because I found a lot of them very predictable. Especially, and don't come for me, the Avengers series.
The less said about Marvel and the Avengers, the better. But I agree with you. A lot of action and superhero movies are predictable. I think superhero movies have more of a thing of, unless it's Marvel, I know fans will get mad, but they are kind of predictable. I mean, look, once you've seen 2012's Avengers, you kind of know where it's going to go. Um, but basically, it's so rare in any kind of genre of film to be genuinely surprised, especially today everything's kind of a hackneyed trope, and it's so hard to find originality, and originality that works, that doesn't have pretense, that doesn't lose its audience in its own presence of work. So, I mean, this, it really blew me out of the water. It really, really did.
Mhm.
Yeah.
and it never lost my interest, even though it was 3 hours long, which is quite the feat. I mean, for comparison, I started getting bored with a lot of superhero movies when I was 17 in 2021. 2011, sorry, 2011. It was especially that movie, the first one about Captain America, that really started to bore me. The origin story of Captain America, I watched it on a trans-Pacific flight that lasted 15 hours, and maybe that did affect how I saw things because I started seeing things really, oh, it's so boring. I just want to get to my destination. And one of the movies I watched was the first Captain America movie where he transformed from that weak, skinny guy into this really buff super soldier. And I did appreciate some moments in it, but it was very boring. It was very hard to get engaged, and you know, it was just very generic in many in many senses of that word, generic. And but fortunately, we never got that with the Batman. The Batman has a lot of action, a lot of twists and turns, and that really keeps you at the edge of the seat. You want to learn more, and it never feels overwhelming. I think one of the things that kind of drove me away from a lot of action in superhero movies was how there were too many twists. And I didn't feel invested enough to actually want to know why each twist was causing another reaction to happen. I was just like, why are you taking us through this endless maze of events that I don't even care about and is giving me a headache?
That's very true. In fact, I think the what you've just described is probably a lot of people's reaction to Snyderverse.
Right, and I haven't watched it, so I can't judge it, but I mean, if it is like that, then maybe I wouldn't like it because I don't really like a lot of twists and turns, especially if we never get to care about the characters or the themes in the first place, right? It's just like scene A, there's an explosion. Scene B, someone dies, and we're supposed to care about how this person's death affects the main character. And then three, oh, the character has learned so much from that person's sacrifice. Now they're gonna have to fight this big bad and prepare to fight this, big boss super villain, right? And then they're always preparing for that ultimate fight until the end.
I mean, well, it's a bit like I mean, I guess with Snyderverse you do care about the characters somewhat. The problem is it gives you so much whiplash that you get these wonderful golden nuggets of moments and characterization, but then for every golden nugget you have, it's like you have 10 times more instances of crazy whiplash. So I feel like if you want to appreciate Snyderverse, maybe digest it in clips and selective clips, I would think.
Yeah, sometimes some movies require that because when you actually watch what's being released on the big screen, it's just too overwhelming.
It's too overwhelming. I mean, for anybody who wants to watch Snyderverse stuff, I want to say do it in digestible pieces, and I would just find scenes and clips. Like for example, I loved what he did with certain characters and how he built up their relationships. The problem was when you put it together as a whole cohesive unit as a movie, it gets lost. So I'd much rather just watch clips of Snyderverse stuff than try to sit through the whole thing.
Right. So the second question is, what was your favorite part of the movie? For me, the favorite part of the movie was it's hard to say. I mean, I guess I like the beginning as well as the ending the most because the beginning sets up who the Batman is and how he represents vengeance and the kind of fear he strikes into the hearts of these, petty villains and pickpockets and bullies.
Very true. Very true. I would have to agree with all that. I think a lot of my favorite parts were, just the more vulnerable, intimate moments with Bruce, like when he's alone in the Batcave or when he's contemplating things and trying to piece things together. And you really see this broken shell of a man who's just been so burnt out by his own complexes and pain and unresolved issues. He really embodies this kind of dark, spiteful demon that's governed by a mixture of rage and grief and his own driving idea of vengeance. And but then you see him slowly emerge out of that as he learns to value like people who are close to him or getting close to him, like, appreciating the value of having Alfred in his life, and then, slowly opening up to Selena. It's a beautiful growth. It's beautiful growth.
Mhm.
I love those moments.
Yeah, that's why I like the beginning and the end the most because you can contrast how far he's changed, right? The beginning,
Yes.
he just sees himself as vengeance, and at the end, you see him helping people, not just, being a loner who strikes from the shadows. You see him
Yes.
helping that lady get into that lift that takes her to the hospital, and
Yeah.
really comforting her, and he's interacting with people, not just, oh, I'm just going to strike at people, these bad people from the shadows. So now he has a more cooperative mindset.
He does, definitely. I was so happy to see him open up. I was so happy to see that growth, and it was beautiful. It was beautifully done. I mean, this is what, if you're going to be doing wild stuff like this, grow into that. Grow into that,
Mhm.
because that is what the people need.
Right. So the third question is Pattinson's Batman your favorite Batman? Which was your least favorite Batman? Okay, for me, I can't really say because I'm not really a longtime DC fan at all. And I only have two Batmans to compare. So, the one from Dark Knight 2008, which was Christian Bale, and Pattinson's Batman from 2022. For me, I would say that I prefer Pattinson, but then again, like I said, I don't remember much of The Dark Knight to begin with. So maybe it's time for a rewatch, and then I can really say which one I prefer. But based on my limited memory of that movie, I would say I prefer Pattinson's Batman, or Battinson as people say, because it seems like he is more vulnerable. We get to see more past his facade, not just, this cool, idealized, super badass hero from the shadows, which I think Bateman's Batman might have been, based on what I remember.
I think you're right. From what I remember from the Nolan trilogy, which had its good moments, like the villains and such were very compelling, like Two Face, how he came to be, and the Joker's just pure madness. I didn't think much of the whole Bane thing. But the problem with the whole Dark Knight trilogy, Nolan's trilogy, is that it just feels very dark and pretentious, and it's way too it invests itself too much in its complications. It pats itself on the back too much for being very complicated. It has its good moments, but sometimes Nolan just feels like a subtler British take on Snyderverse at times. I know people will come out for it,
Mhm.
but that's how it feels to me. That's how it
I
feels.
see.
It's just like if
Mhm.
you had Snyderverse in slow mo with more sepia shots, sepia gray
Right.
shots. Yeah.
Right, I misspoke. His name is Christian Bale. I said something else, but
Yeah, I think
yeah.
it's with David. Yeah, Christian Bale, and
I said
every time I think
Patrick
of
Bateman
Christian
or
Bale,
something.
I keep thinking of okay, I keep thinking of that one guy in Pocahontas, and then I think of Howell because he voiced those two guys.
Oh, I see.
Every time I think of
Yeah.
Christian Bale, I just keep thinking of Howell, and I just kept thinking throughout, like watching the Nolan trilogy, he was going to yell Sophie or something.
Oh my gosh. So, number 4, how did you find Batman's relationship with Catwoman in this movie? Well, this was the first time I have ever seen a movie with these themes of Batman and Catwoman interacting like this. I knew they were a couple based on my readings online, but I don't recall Catwoman appearing in 2008 Batman, The Dark Turns.
I think somewhere Anne Hathaway made, but it was like a brief thing. I don't even remember because that's how, to me, forgettable the whole Dark Knight trilogy was. But honestly,
Mhm.
I can't imagine someone like Anne Hathaway trying to do Catwoman. That just sounds awful. Like, no knocking on her as an actress. I mean, she does very good in other
Mhm.
roles. But no, I Catwoman, there has to be kind of a strength, a resilience, but also, I think there needs to be a heart, because even though a lot of people are very tempted to make Catwoman as this very selfish, self-serving woman, I think she's capable of having a big heart. She just hides it very well. And I love
Mhm.
what they, I just want to say Zoe Kravitz was just magnificent. I mean,
Mhm.
someone please give her an Oscar.
Mhm.
I mean, beautiful done, beautifully done.
Yes, because when we first meet her, we know that she is someone who cares deeply for Annika, who is her roommate, and she disappeared unfortunately due to spoiler something that happens with the mob.
Yes, sadly, yes. And just to see her go through that lengths and that, despite her, cool and sharpness, she does have this, this opening of her heart, and that, she is compassionate, she does care, and we see how she cares for Annika. And we see how she slowly opens up for Bruce too, like
Mhm.
that moment when they're on that catwalk bridge and she pulls him up and they're just holding each other. It that was beautifully done. I
Mhm.
was mesmerized by that, and also it kind of gave me Joel and Malka vibes. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, for those who are new, Joel and Malka are my characters from my Tapas graphic novel, The Book of Joel. I've included a link in the description in case you want to check it out. But yes, one of the reasons why Tete told me to watch this movie was because she felt that Catwoman and Batman have a strong similarity to how my characters Joel and Malka interact.
It really evoked that. As soon as I saw this unfold, I thought, "Brother, have I seen it before?" And it's right here in front of me.
Right, absolutely. So I would say that, they really complement each other really well. And I also like how Catwoman, her own personal story affects Bruce's and how that challenges his view of what vengeance is. I won't go into too many spoilers, but there's a part where she wants to seek vengeance and for Annika as well, but for someone else as well. And that really makes Bruce question why he's doing this. Is it legitimate to just base his whole existence at like over this concept of vengeance?
Exactly. Exactly. And I love the part where, spoiler, he tells her, "You've paid enough." And I just love the way he stopped her from doing this. And, you know, not only was it a realization about herself, but about himself as well. And he didn't want to see her get hurt. And now he's realizing not so much is he hurting himself, but are his actions repercussive in hurting others? Like, you would
Hmm.
think he's doing vengeance and something beneficial, but is he really?
Like I said, I always felt like some of the superhero um reasoning for defending people and vigilante justice was kind of based on faulty reasoning in a way, because especially since the tragedy in Bruce's life, which was his parents' death, happened when he was so young, and now he is what, 30. So he's been letting these feelings, which are obviously very overwhelming and very tragic, but he's been having these feelings for over 20 years maybe, and having these ideas mold him into what he is, but he's not letting any new ideas come in. It's just the same idea, and then he's kind of viewing everything through that lens, and that's going to contribute to him having these very solid black and white ideas of what vengeance and justice mean.
Exactly, exactly. A lot of times, that's the flaw of a lot of superhero reasoning, a lot of vigilanteism. Um, that's why for characters, and I'm not going to go for other superhero characters because I'll just leave it as it is. But for the two icons, if you will, of DC, Batman and Superman, which we will get into a long podcast about that. The vigilanteism is initially flawed, and it's about them learning not to do that. I think some writers though will focus on that, and they will want to kind of stew in those darker, edgier arcs or periods, or just kind of let it fizzle into nihilism, if
Hmm.
you will, and
Right.
fatalism. But I prefer it when a writer can look at these characters and go, no, these men can grow, they can change, they can learn. And
Hmm.
I love to see that.
Right.
And I think it works very good for Batman because he is a double-edged sword. I mean, he is darkness, he is fear, he is vengeance, but at the same time, that in itself can be juxtaposed, and like we see, he can be a thing of kind of hope and comfort,
Mm-hmm.
because we have to accept there is darkness and meanness in this world, but we can live through it and overcome it and control it, not let it control us. Like, there was a very good comic which I will have to hunt down, but it's called Batman Ego, and
Mm-hmm.
it deals with this particular kind of struggle with darkness and not letting it overtake you to become something terrifying.
Right. We will have separate podcasts discussing this issue. But like I said, it feels like an escapism, kind of just like this kind of idea that they kind of warp their whole lives around so they can give themselves meaning. Because it makes you wonder, do these people have other aspects to their lives other than vigilanteism? If they define themselves solely through vigilanteism, does that mean that they are lacking in other aspects and unconfident when it comes to other things?
That begs the question too, because there are a number of works that do explore that to a degree, and very well, I should add. But for the most part, when we see it in a lot of media or the more popular comics or what's out there generally, unfortunately, those are not quite addressed in full. And I think maybe that's the disadvantage sometimes with comics, but at the same time, there is an advantage, because then that allows the fans to kind of fill in the cracks and come up with their own conclusions, their own head canons,
Mm-hmm.
and their own versions of it. You know, that's why a lot of times these comics are kind of open ended and not filled out. So other writers and artists can come in and make their own, if you will, canon. And, you know, sometimes it's crazy, sometimes it's absolutely ridiculous and insane, but other times it works brilliantly. And that's sort of the thing one has to accept about comics and the storytelling genre it is, whether it's being told through original comic or graphic novel, or even as we're seeing a film adaptation.
Right. So the next question is, what did you think of the villains in this film?
The
So I will
villain,
go first, right?
yes.
Yes. So the villains, I think they were done really well. And it's interesting how, one of the villains, spoiler alert, the Riddler, he basically mirrors Batman, as I said in my reaction slash review video. He basically does the same thing. He is also someone who is obsessed with vengeance, and he is also obsessed with his childhood trauma, which was also being an orphan, but without the privilege that Bruce enjoyed, as the kid of multimillionaires. So, this is someone who was very isolated growing up, didn't have any friends or support, and he felt like he was being tortured every day just by existing in the orphanage. And this is why he wants to, bring justice out into the spotlight and basically expose, the mayor and all these other people as hypocrites who can't do anything for people who are actually suffering. And, this really raises the question of who is Batman and is he really the hero he claims to be? Because isn't that what he's actually doing? Just more extreme? So, is there actually a really fine line between what Batman's doing and what he could potentially become? Because what is separating him from becoming like the Riddler? More spoilers alert. So basically, there's a scene after the Riddler has been captured. He reveals that he wanted to be captured because he wanted to break this to Batman that, hey, we're actually very similar and, we could work together to do the same thing that you've been doing all these years, right? Because I'm doing the same thing. Wouldn't you be impressed by me? Because I'm just basically applying your principles, but taking them to a new extreme. So, am I not exposing the hypocrisies of this grim, gray society which takes advantage of innocence? But of course, Batman is just disgusted. And then, this was not how the Riddler envisioned it to be because he wanted to break Batman. He wanted to bring him over to his side so he could break him out of prison and then they can terrorize Gotham together.
Exactly. You summarized it succinctly. That is exactly the whole premise, the concept, and the execution of the Riddler and the character that he is. And I think, you know, honestly, as good as we had seen, you know, like Ledger's Joker in the Nolan trilogy. Honestly, this felt, the Riddler himself, it felt very scary because it was so realistic, very natural, because this is kind of like, we have seen throughout, like people who study crime history or anybody who's heard about different crimes, this is how a lot of homegrown terrorists and serial killers are formed. Um, or how they react or how they hide through such a mask of normalcy. I mean, even when the Riddler's going around doing Zodiac stuff and making weird live streams wearing the most creepiest mask ever, um, his manner and intentions, once he is off the mask too, as well, um, he just looks like an ordinary guy you could know. Like that one quiet guy at the office or something who, you say, "Hey, you want to come over for Saturday night bowling?" And he says no, he's busy doing. I mean, not to be mean to people who say no to Saturday night bowling at
Mhm.
the office, but you know what I mean.
Mhm.
It's just scary how natural it is, and and the Riddler live streams. He has a social media following.
Yeah, he only has 300 or 500 followers though. So he's not.
Well, true, but
Yeah.
still, they're very supportive of him, and I think I think he probably has a Ko-fi or a Patreon.
That's probably true. That's how he got all the weapons.
That's true. I mean, somebody was giving him thousands and thousands of dollars, and
Mhm.
you know,
All right. So what did you think of the cinematography of the movie?
the cinematography was just absolutely. It was both at the same time panoramic, wide scope. You felt like a bird surveying this grim, dark, polluted landscape of a rotting city. Um, but at the same time, it was also immersive, intimate, and it just gave the feel of everything's dimly lit, everything is harshly lit, everything is industrial, gritty. Even the glitz of the nightclub feels sinister and lifeless and cruel. Um, and the only, terms of kind of soft comfort we get are probably with Selena in her apartment talking to Bruce through the contact lens contact device,
Mm. Oh
and
yeah.
and Bruce is there in his bat cave. Um, and I shamelessly also enjoyed that because Pattinson was shirtless. But I'm sorry, but uh, but it's just the cinematography was beautifully done, and it made you feel like you were in there, because like a lot of superhero action movies are so glitzy, are so clean and CGI and glossy that it just feels like you're just watching an HD image. You're not in it. You're
Mhm.
not like
That's
sensory
true.
tasting it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I really liked the grittiness. It feels like, you can really feel the urban decay and that this is a city with a, large criminal underbelly. And, I really like the rain and how basically you don't really see daytime in the movie except for that one funeral scene where he's not wearing the Batman outfit for once. Every time he wears the Batman outfit, it's always dark.
It's always dark, always raining. I mean, as Batman always says, he is the night.
Exactly. I agree with the contact lenses thing, and that's I guess those moments you can actually see more of the real people behind Catwoman and Batman. You really see their um, how they see things, how they literally see things, how they interact with each other, and it's also bathed in a very warm color, reddish pinkish tone. So that's very different from the rest of the movie, which is very gray and kind of dark and all these bluish
Red,
tones. Yeah.
like
And red
harsh
as
red.
well. Yeah.
Yeah, it was beautifully done. I loved it. I mean, that scene between Bruce and Selena, uh, I felt like it was a wonderful embodiment of that Nirvana song "Come as You Are."
Mhm. So, second last question. How was the score like? I personally felt like the score was really great. It really caught me off guard at the beginning when they played classical music, especially Schubert's Ave Maria, which isn't really something you would associate with superhero movies, right? Because you usually think of, I don't know, rock, metal, hip hop, or maybe pop when you think of superheroes because they're so modern and so action based. Like you wouldn't
Or
think of,
kind of like
yeah,
like a score that's just really, it's like it's too epic for its own good. Um, I
like
really love.
Snyderverse, right?
Actually, I will say this about Snyderverse: Man of Steel had a beautiful score, and it was beautifully done. I want to say, if I could look at the DC cinematic universe, well, not necessarily in this category of canon, because fans are going to nitpick, but just for people who aren't fans, I want to put. I'm going to put the Batman 2022 on top of the scale, and then right below it, right very much on top like pancake, um, the Hans Zimmer score for Man of Steel, because it was beautifully epic, but it was also soft and gentle and had its moments of sorrow and quiet jubilation. It was a beautiful score, especially pieces like First Flight. I mean, that's beautifully done. That was a beautiful piece. And then the other piece, What Are You Doing When You're Not Saving the World? That was beautifully done. And then I would have to say for probably down below it, Batman versus Superman. I loved that piece. This Is My World. Oh, it gets you right. It does me. I thought Hans Zimmer did beautiful with that.
Mhm. Right. I agree. I mean, I haven't watched it, but I did see some of the clips you sent me, and, there are some really great moments from that. So,
Yeah.
yes, I totally agree.
Mhm.
And last question to round it off, how would you rate this movie? For me, I would say it is a solid 5 out of 5.
I would have to say that too. A solid 5 out of 5. If there was a higher rating, like 10 out of 10, I would do that too. I feel like I would give it double the rating because it's just so good, and I we have yet to really experience a really good solid film like that, like not just for superhero genre, but of characterization and any kind of storytelling. We have not seen that in a very, very long time.
Mhm, I agree. Well, thank you so much. This was a wonderful review, and we should review more movies and books and everything like this, in this format. I think this is a very exciting way to review something.
I think we should. I think we and it was fun to do this, and I'm so glad you got to enjoy this. And thank you again for having me join you on the review of the Batman 2022.
You're very welcome. See you.
See you.
Bye.